Greetings! It is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on the Shadowrun role-playing game system. We last left off, we were talking about running in the shadows, and we dove into toxins. Let's talk more about toxins today. Well, as I said before, once a toxin has been exposed to a target, the speed will determine when the effect takes place, and it will take place at the end of that combat turn. This effect will, of course, have a power that is going to be resisted by your toxin-resistant test. Let's talk about that test. This test will be rolled with your body, plus any kind of protective rating that you have that would add against this. Every success you have reduces the power of the toxin. If it ends up at 0, there's no effect, you've managed to resist it, no damage, no nothing. If you fail to reduce it down to 0, there is still an effect, but it will be based upon the power. Granted, this may vary depending on the toxins, how this actually affects your character at this point in time, but you will still have that whatever remaining power worth of toxin in your system. Now, if you have a contact vector poison on a weapon, and you're using it to try to hit a person, basically poisoning them when you're hitting them, then the targets, the person that's going to be affected by the toxin, gets their impact armor as a bonus against this in this case. They would also roll impact armor. They're basically, their armor is preventing some of that contact into you. Now, toxins can be applied in concentrated amounts. What it means for concentrated amounts is more than one dose either at a time or over a short period of time. This can have varying effects, and it will be up to your GM to determine really how it affects. Whether this means an increase in power, some more potency to the effects itself, regardless of what it actually means, or if it has any effect whatsoever, will be completely up to your GM, and they will determine it for you, especially if you're getting exposed to multiple effects, or if someone is being exposed to multiple toxic effects by you. Granted, this will be also very situational, because it will depend on what's going on at the time, whether it makes sense for this toxin to be more powerful then. If you're in contact in some way with toxins for an extended period of time, it might also have an experience. So it's more than just you get hit with multiple doses of the same thing. For example, if I'm in a cloud of toxic gas where I have to either have it as contact or breathing it in, I'm continually in contact with it. So it's more than just like if someone keeps, maybe a scorpion keeps stinging me, getting more venom in it, or a snake keeps biting me, getting more venom in me. If I'm in that constant contact, that may make me have higher that, or maybe more checks. So the fact is, that might also be effect. More resistance checks, rather than just maybe more like a person with a needle, rather than giving me one dose of poison, has 4 doses in it and pumps it all into me at once. That's a very concentrated effect. You can get that continuous, too, of the toxic cloud. And then again, then it would be maybe GM's prerogative, maybe you just resist multiple times, rather than just one more concentrated effort to resist it. Now, the protection that you are granted by an antidote to a poison must be taken before you get the effects of the poison. So, regardless if you've already been exposed or if it's before you're being exposed, you need to make sure to take that antidote before the effects of the poison would hit you. Then you're using that antidote's protective rating versus that poison, or whatever protections that antidote provides will be provided against it. If you take it after the effects have hit, you still can get something from an antidote. It will not reduce or heal any damage dealt by the poison, but some of the other effects that the toxin might occur might be either mitigated or reduced because you've taken this antidote. So there is an advantage to taking an antidote even after you've hit by the effects, just not as big of one. Now, with the proper equipment, someone with the medicine skill could normally synthesize an antidote, though there are certain complex toxins which might require more material, more time, maybe some kind of special material, or there are certain toxins which you may not be able to synthesize an antidote for at all. So it will be, again, a little bit up to the GM and what kind of situation it is with each of these toxins. A good list of sample toxins is actually provided in the book for you to check out and understand some of these. And again, these aren't all of them. These are just a bunch of samples. that could be used by or used against your players. It's also important to note here, if you are in physical damage overflow from a toxin, then an antidote will automatically stabilize you. So there is an advantage to the antidote in this case. Let's talk about drugs. The fact is, the recreational drugs that we know about now, they've gone out of style. Things like BTL, better than life chips, and other similar electronics have mostly replaced them. The fact is that these things could be used within the Matrix or online to, as what it sounds like, it's better than life. Draw people in. Now, this is less physically mitigating than, of course, recreational drugs was, but it's highly addictive. It's better than your real life. Now, this doesn't mean there aren't recreational drugs out there. They've just taken steps. Those people that produced them before, the mobsters, the cartels, the various groups, they began to change what they were doing. They developed genetically modified drugs, ones that have had genetic modification or modifications to them to make them more advanced and much better at what they do. Plus, they've also begun to use awakened material within their drugs to make even more potent ones. So they have awakened plant material, magical plant material in drugs. So you can see they've counteracted, in a way, the electronic side of this addiction chart with their own things. Substance abuse is a big thing on the street, because all these things exist out there. But it also does exist in both the Shadowrunning world and the corporate world. Not just because of recreation. There are plenty of people that use these better than life chips, or take some of these new and enhanced drugs for recreation. There are others that use some of them to take off edges, to basically give them advantages in certain circumstances. There might be certain drugs that you might want to take that might help you out in combat. There's always the risk of addiction, no matter what you do. Role-playing the effects of addiction and possibly trying to cure it are pure role-playing. You're going to want to act this out and interact with it, and going to have to face it out. Your decisions as a player, if you are faced with it and you have gained an addiction, are going to be what helps determine if you're overcoming it or not, or if you're diving deeper into it. And your GM will react to these decisions that you make. They might pose challenges at you, things like temptations or other things, or maybe you hang out with something that still uses that, and so you're tempted that way, even though they're not offering you. Just little things like that that add to the role-playing aspect of what it means to have an addiction. It is important to note that, other than possibly gaining it in the course of the game by the various actions you take, you could start with an addiction if you take that negative quality. Addictions and the substances that you might be using and abusing to gain these addictions, the level of them in the game world is going to be determined by the GM. Your GM might want to have them heavily in the world or not use them at all. And if you are planning to have an addiction, you should reflect upon what kind of game your GM is running. If your GM doesn't go for certain substances that you might be addicted to, then of course, probably not going to be addicted to it. It wouldn't make much sense if that is not a major component in the world that you're working in. So you have to make sure you work along with your game master when it comes to an addiction that you're not only bringing to the game when you start it, but also how you manage it when you have it. Structure for real. But that's it for today. I finished up talking about toxins by talking about first resisting toxins, and of course I talked about what an antidote would be, that you should really take it before the effects, which we know when the effects take place, will take place. You could take it after, and it does have some positive effects, mitigating some of the other effects other than damage, maybe stabilizing you if you're in physical damage overflow. Regardless, toxins are something that you're probably going to have to deal with one point or another, whether it's an awakened creature, someone using it, or something else that might have a reason for exposing it to you, or some kind of exposure of what you're doing. You might just have a toxin from it. Toxic plant, toxic anything. Then we began to talk about drugs and addiction, because these are real things on the streets, in the world of Shadowrun. there are things out there that are highly addictive. And granted, many of them, especially the better-than-life chips, they are less degrading to your body physically, most of the time, than any kind of drug you would have before. Much more addictive, too. Highly addictive. But the fact is, the only way your body's going to degrade is you're not going to act in the real world anymore. You're just going to be in this better-than-life simulation all the time and let your body degrade into nothingness. That's what it is. But it does not have any of those other effects that are normally associated with it. And the fact is, you might have to deal with both the short-term side effects of drugs and long-term effects of drugs, because both of those exist for any drug we're talking about. Whether one of the recreational ones we would talk about from our time, or from one of the ones that's been developed into the future. We're going to dive more, though, next time into drugs. There is some more we want to talk about here with them and understanding them a little bit more, because the book does provide samples that give a little bit of information about what they do and how you should react to them, both as becoming addicted and some advice for its use, what it means to use it, what it means to be a user. And hopefully then we will move on, of course, to BTLs, better than life chips, and talk about them. So a lot of substance abuse we're going to be talking about in the Shadowrun world, because it's out there, and that's more next time. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you would say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It's just for the channel, the empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon, link in the description below. There's some great rewards there. It helps to grow and improve the channel. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.